Hey. Hey, wait a minute. Hey, what are you doing? I'm dizzy. I need a doctor.
I'll bring back a doctor.
Wendy?
I'm gonna go now.
Wendy?
Yes.
You got a big surprise coming to you.
Oh fuck, Ross Stewart is injured.
Oh, check it out! Go check it out.
Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland review show. I'm not feeling too well. I'm a little bit ropey, so forgive my voice in advance. But basically, Sunderland's trip to Teesside ended in a narrow defeat as Tony Mowbray suffered his first defeat as Sunderland boss at the Riverside. From a Sunderland viewpoint, there's plenty of topics for uncomfortable discussion in some ways, but as always, we're going to be here to do it. We've got a returning guest and a regular. First and foremost, we have the lovable, always honest and croaky voice, even croakier than mine actually, voice of Brad Sharp. Brad, how are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, mate. Been a bit of a long day considering the time I got home last night after the game. But yeah, I'm not too bad, all considering.
Yeah, me too. I'm all right with it, to be honest, but we'll get stuck into it, plenty to talk about. But second of all, we've spent most of these shows saying how much we've missed him, and I'm delighted to confirm he's back in all of his beardy glory. It's the magnificent Dave Lawrence. Dave, lovely to see you, mate, even if I am a little under the weather. How are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, not bad at all. Yeah, feeling a little bit croaky and stuff myself. So there's obviously something going around. I can't blame the smog. I wasn't there, but yeah, did watch it.
We'll get straight into it. I mean, a poor first half performance, Brad, followed by an improved second half display from an effort perspective, I guess, but not enough ultimately. And we lost to Teesside Derby, not Derby, 1-0. What did you make of the performance, Brad?
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag, really. Like you say, we didn't start great. However, we probably had the best chance of the night through Pritchard. That goes in. Could be a bit of a different story. Second half, yes, we did play a little bit better. I thought we controlled the play as a whole, but speaking of holes, there was a massive hole left up front. The news that Ross Stewart was out 10 minutes before kick-off. You felt the deflation amongst the crowd. And it was just a massive miss, wasn't he? We were getting into areas and just no one was there. Or when we had to go along, not with the channels, that's where you just expect to see Ross Stewart stretching them beautiful big legs of his. But he wasn't there. For all his efforts, Sims, he can't do that role. That's not his type of game. And I'm going to be quite critical of Sims, actually. Probably since QPR, I think he's been quite poor. And he could do with actually coming out the side. But because of our fantastic recruitment, that is now not an option because he is the only striker that we've got. He is literally all we have unless we promote one of the 23s or Diallo sits in there. So that is quite worrying that we did have a lot of the ball but didn't create anything really, did we?
No, in many ways we didn't. I think I really appreciate you mentioning the 4 talking points today in the first point there, Brad. Thanks very much. Keeping me on my toes there. Thanks, chap. Dave, same sort of question to you though. We're talking like the day afterwards, so I think it's probably a bit more measured, but I'm not bothered that we got beat off Boro. I've got to be honest, Dave. Like, and I know that's a lot of Boro fans listening to it will say that, but I said before, to me, it's not like it. I don't like getting beat off Reading, so I don't like getting beat off Boro, if that makes any sense. But I think there was probably a couple of things in the performance that were concerning, which we'll get into. But ultimately, Dave, how did you feel about the performance?
Prepared us, hasn't he? And I think anyone who takes the emotion out of it's going to realise that it's going to be a season of indifference. I think we're going to win more than we lose. I think we're going to see some growth within the squad. But yes, there is ultimately parts of it which are lacking, which Brad's already said. But I just think first 10, 15 minutes, Boro probably played it a bit more like a derby. We've tried to like take a step back. We've tried to get on the ball. But the problem is when we were getting on the ball, we were sloppy. The passes weren't crisp enough. They were lacking. You know, Jack Clark, so he's going to be someone who frustrates and delights in equal measure. Hey, I've noticed a couple of people say on Twitter, the one thing you've got to give him is he wanted the ball every time. He did not shy away from it. So fair play to him for that. It's especially in what sounded like a decent atmosphere from the TV cameras. So yeah, first half just a little bit sloppy. Second half better. Just didn't look like we'd score really, and I think that's. There's got to be a way of. I said after watching the first 35 minutes, the only real way we're going to score is if we get players to hit the byline and then put the ball across the box. Trying to slide the ball through for Ellis Sims and stuff was just not going to work for me. Playing 2 number 10s, you've got to get them on the ball, but it's pointless them picking the ball up on the halfway line. You need them in the final third. So yeah, there was a lot of huff and puff, and I think the thing. If I'm being brutally honest, I think it just showed that Middlesbrough have been in the Championship for years. They've got a little bit more nous. They've got a little bit more physicality, stuff like that. And let's be honest, Sunderland for a good few seasons, since even back in League One, physicality has been our big issue. Technically very good. Physically, we're probably not the greatest. So, listen, it was 1-0 against an established team who people think are going to be in the top 6. We weren't disgraced. We weren't played off the park. We weren't frightened of anything. Yeah, bad day at the office. Move on, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I mean, sort of leaving yesterday, I went with Connor, who I think many people know, and got back in the car and it was like, well, we were never out of it, I guess, but we were never really in it. And I think if you'd said, the 3 defeats we'll have in the first 8 games or 9 games, whatever it is, would be Norwich, Sheffield United and Middlesbrough, I wouldn't have been that shocked. And it would have looked far healthier for getting more, like what we deserved against QPR and Coventry. But that's probably a longer conversation, which we will come on to. But Brad, I'll switch back to you. You've kind of made a lot of these points really already, but we've got to kind of discuss it. I mean, it's really hard not to mention like the huge negative. The unfortunate thing about today's show is probably that normally we go positive, positive, negative, positive, and it's like negative, negative, positive, negative, which is the way I've wrote it down here. But Ross Stewart pulling out last minute due to a thigh injury. In all fairness, it doesn't sound good. Like the way that Tony Mowbray discussed the injury was just like, all right, that's preparing us for something that's not great. And you've seen his face on the Sky cameras, which I watched the highlights back today. You can see his face. He's like, nah, that's me thigh done. Ultimately, if we have to do without him, we have to do without him. Hopefully, it's not for too long. But I think it was really evident last night, wasn't it, Brad? How much do we miss Big Ross Stewart just as a player in total, not just his goals?
Yeah, massively. I mean, we touched on it a lot last season through that spell he had where he wasn't scoring goals. But how crucial he was to the team itself. He was creating goals or he was creating space for the guys to do their job. And that was so clear last night. Every ball down the channel just didn't stick. Whereas Roscoe, he's just here, there and everywhere. And at times when I was watching it, I was forgetting he was playing. And then when 09 was picking them balls in the first half and going long, you look up and go, oh shit, he's not there, is he? And it is quite worrying because we did say last season, sorry to touch back on League One, before Stewart gets injured, we ain't going up. We've got no one there. I'm afraid now we've got no one there and we're in the next league up. I think Sims was probably brought in as a replacement to Stewart, and it's just so happened that he's been playing alongside him. But based on recent performance, I've said it, I don't think we're going to get the same output from Ellis Sims. And it just takes that missing out on Nathan Broider, that little bit more bittersweet, bit shitty, because this would have been his chance now. And it came 7 games into the season where he thought he wasn't going to get the games, but now he would have had that chance. And the fact when you look down the team now, I think you've got a couple of kids in the 23s who people maybe could look at promoting to the first team. But we've seen it in previous years. We've had players banging them into the 23s like Josh Hawks, and they've took a step up, and it's just not worked. So my worry is it's Sims, and that's it. And now, touch wood, God help us, he gets injured in the next couple of weeks. Where do we go from there? But Stewart is a massive miss, and if it's 1 game, if it's 10 games, it's scary. So yeah, let's see where we go.
Yeah, I think it's massive, and I've been in the kind of privileged position to have watched Ellis Sims a lot more than maybe some people had done. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm the only person that watches Scottish football, but I've seen him a fair amount last year with Hearts, and he can't play in a one. That's not the way he rolls. He cannot play in a one. He is someone who played up front a lot with Liam Boyce last year, and Liam Boyce is in terms of height and the way that he plays a bit different to Roscoe, but similar in some ways. And I just felt like last night there was points when you could see players on the pitch, and I don't want this to be like let's all hammer Ellis Sims because it's like one bad game and a couple of averagey ones beforehand. I think he's a good striker, and I was very excited about him coming in. I still am. But you could see certain players being like, "Oh, not come for that. Do this, do that." You could see players getting a bit annoyed at him a little bit at points. I think Pritchard did, and it was just because he wasn't doing what Ross Stewart was doing. I think Ross Stewart's got so much quality, and the one big point for me with Ross Stewart is, this kind of comes up my next question, which I will sort of throw at Dave, but I'll give maybe my viewpoint beforehand. Ross Stewart's always going to be a miss. No matter what happens and no matter who you replace him, Ross Stewart's always who you're going to miss. Teams have key players. Teams have players that they really struggle without. If you took, say, I'm trying to think, was that Kevin De Bruyne out of the Man City team, they're not going to be as good. What they have got is someone who's going to come in and make sure that the machine and the plan that they've got sort of works. And I think one of the big things for me is, obviously he was taken out yesterday, Ross Stewart, and he was going to be missed anyway. I personally think even if you brought like a Broadhead in, we might have got beat last night, if I'm honest with you. And I think it's still going to be a bit of a worry if your main striker and your best player, far and wide, is taking out the team that close to kick-off. The problem is, and again, I don't want to go too into the recruitment. I don't want to dissect it too much of the transfer window, because I think ultimately the time and on the pitch performances will tell us how well this transfer window went. But I think there's a lot of raised concerns through some people that we signed, like Mishu, Diallo, Bart and Benetti. They were exciting, but the concerns were that we were still short across the pitch, not just up front. And it may seem like an obvious point, but the sheer fact that we didn't have an ample replacement for Stewart that we could just put in and say, we'll keep the same system. I know he's a different player, but let's just try and do what Roscoe does. Where I changed everything, and Tony Moore said in 3 minutes, and it was a formation change and everything. The way we play is two up front. So I guess the pushback here for me, Dave, is Stewart and Sims are front two. That's who we play. We had to change the whole way we play at short notice last night. Had we signed a striker in the transfer window of any sort, how much easier does that make the last minute dropout of Ross Stewart in terms of being able to set the team up, as opposed to having to completely change everything, Dave?
It's a tough one, isn't it? And listen, I'm very cautious with. I know Brad's mentioned that we've got this segment of fans who believe that like the answer to everything is just going to get an under 23 player and bring him in. You've got to be careful with them. You don't want to absolutely murder them in terms of confidence and ability if they're just. And look, if no matter who you'd have called on last night, I think you've just alluded to it, to replace Ross Stewart, it was going to be difficult, because Ross Stewart, I think we all said it at some point, and we all know how much I bang on the drum, but it was very, very clear for me to see that he could play at a higher level than what he was playing last season, based on his movement, his overall output into a game. He was always going to stand out like a sore thumb, even at this level. Still, part of me thinks he could probably go and do it another division higher as well, personally. Big statement, I know. But listen, yeah, there's feelings, isn't there, within certain things. I think one thing I've picked up on Tony Mowbray as well, it's going to be interesting to see the other two new lads. Fair enough, he's given Diallo a little bit of a chance last night. Not much. But I'm not so sure, and I'm probably going to be proved wrong on Saturday, to be fair. But the other two boys, I'm not sure how close they are to the first team, if I'm honest. I don't think they're under 23 players. I think they'll train with the first team, but don't be surprised if you see them playing cup games and it takes 6 months for them to get a game, which makes you think that you're even lighter then. Because I don't, just picking up on a few things he said, I just don't think he's got the confidence in them. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully they come out and training every day, practice matches and whatever, and they blow them away and they're involved. But it looks like, especially if Ross goes out for a couple of months, we're going to have to find a new way of playing. Or we do what we've done for the last 4 years and we just play Luke O'Nien up front because he's played everywhere else. So we might as well throw him up there. So yeah, he's going to be a huge miss. We joke on time and time again that it's a Roscoe world and we're all living in it. But unfortunately, I think we have to admit there's a huge element of truth in it, isn't there?
Just touching on the back of that, Dave, when you're saying obviously these young lads, maybe we'll see them in 6 months or so. I think depending on the length of Ross Stewart's time out now, we are going to change the shape, and I wouldn't surprise to go back to a 4-2-3-1. So now I think Mowbray's hands might be forced to bring these younger lads in, like these Michu and Barn, Bennett. I think you might see them a bit sooner than was originally planned because of the change in shape and the amount of players that we're going to be using in the midfield. Ultimately, it's going to be, if it's a back four, you're going to have your two and then a three behind Sims. So it wouldn't surprise us now that we would see them earlier than Tony Mowbray initially thought he would have to use them, if you would agree with that.
I think we will see them. But I just think, and look, I'm quite excited by like Michoud and stuff like that, in the same way I was kind of excited by Diaky and Hoffman. But there's every much way that can work out and be very different to the way maybe Diaky and Hoffman have worked out. And, you know, there's plenty of evidence there to say that will be right. And I think it's really hard to articulate because you can't see into the future. But for me, and I think I alluded to it when we talked about Neil a little bit last week. I can't remember which podcast it was on, even if it was just the review show. But I really like, in principle, I really like the recruitment model. I think it makes tons of sense. Young players under the age of 24 that we've scouted seem to have some sort of data on that are going to have resale value and are going to make Sunderland a sustainable football club. It's brilliant. Really, really good sort of recruitment plan. But if you chuck all your eggs into that basket and don't deviate a little bit, that's what worries me a tad. I think what worries me even more is the sheer fact that we just didn't bring in a centre forward to when we play two up front. Can we afford to change the way we play completely? Well, we're going to have to, I think, if Ross is out for a while. And even if he's not out that long, you're still running that risk that what if Sim gets injured, then you're still going to have to play with one up front. I mean, I'm a bit more confident with Ross up front and say like a Pritchard behind him or something like that. But I think last night, and there's no blame to Tony Mowbray at all, I think his hands are pretty tied. Like there's only so much you can do when your main striker gets injured with 8 minutes and you haven't got a striker on the bench. He's not in charge of the recruitment. We know that. But I just think it was really short-sighted. And I was dying to kind of be wrong with it. Because, like, ultimately, if I'm wrong, Sunderland succeed. But I just feel a little bit worried. And then we're talking about changing shape. If we go to back four, who plays at left back? You instantly have, like, an issue there. Because Cirkin looked knackered as well last night. And I can't see him being fit for at least Saturday.
It's probably going to be Elise or 9, isn't it? And you bring Bath and Wright into the middle. But yeah, the two positions, mate, that we were crying out for and said that we need reinforcements, we need backup, is the left-sided, a left-back, left-side centre-half and a striker. And within 70 minutes yesterday, both them key players, by the way, Cirkin's probably our second best player this season consistently. Both of them now we're looking to be out. We've got an international break in a week's time, but that's 3 games in that week. So if they're missing for just them 3 games and one of them comes back just after, another one just after that, yes, we're short. And it just seems like a bit of a, I'm not going to say karma, but I am going to say karma, that the ones that all the fans were screaming out for, the 2 positions that we said were desperately needed, they're the 2 now where we looked at it last night and went, oh, fuck. Sorry for the language.
No, you could just tell, though. Like, I mean, it was like...
It was very Sunderland. Another banter moment of the season already.
I think in many ways, though, as well, like, there was people saying this sort of last year, weren't there, with Ross Stewart and saying because of Broadhead's fitness and stuff like that, like, got to potentially bring someone in. But last year we could kind of cope on up front, and Ross didn't get injured. This year, looks like we're going with the two up top, which has worked. To be fair, like they didn't get called the SES for no reason. I mean, if they were crap, you're not going to get called the SES, are you? But it does raise tons of questions, and like we've gone far too deep into it, and I've depressed myself. But it is right. Like, and you know what? I really hope it's wrong, because if it's wrong, then Sunderland win games. Brilliant. And I'm really happy with how we started. I'm not too downhearted about getting beat off Middlesbrough. Wasn't too downhearted about getting beat off Norwich, nor Sheffield United. My concern is the next few games are tough. And if you lose two of those next three, that steady performance suddenly turns into, oh, hang on a minute. And then you're kind of desperate for these players to come back. But I guess, I mean, we're kind of like pissing against the wall, aren't we, really here? Because ultimately we haven't done it. And fingers crossed, Speakman or the recruitment team come back in 6 months' time, go, not to worry about, man, good team, we just change the shape. I hope that's the case. I've got my concerns by it, and fair enough. I'm allowed them concerns, and people are allowed to also not be concerned and think more positively about that. There's no wrong answer with that, but fingers crossed we can come through it. I think, Dave, admittedly, we were always in the game last night, which you sort of said, just going back to the game, but it was comfortably our worst performance of the season, I think. And that's not to say we were terrible. We were at points. Nothing kind of came off. But it's probably testament to how well we've played in a lot of the games beforehand. It was a weird one because I went on Twitter and was expecting a lot of people to feel a bit like maybe me and be a bit more, oh, well, you know, Boro's a good team, yada, yada. They'll probably be there or thereabouts. But it seemed to really split the fan base, the result. If Twitter's a barometer, which it shouldn't be probably, but you had some feeling really concerned by the things I've seen, and probably a lot of the stuff we just spoke about is where the concern came from. And others pointing at the fact that we played really well in I think the 7 games previous, which I agree with, and it was just a night off. Which camp are you in, Dave? That kind of, oh crap, let's be really, really worried, or it was a night off?
I think, hey, listen, I'm not one to tell anyone that their opinion's wrong, but I think if you're saying that there's deep concerns based on that last night, I'm not so sure that you should be reading so much into it. Listen, Pete, I saw some tweets. I'm sick of this. We're a young squad and blah blah blah. And listen, we are. That's the be all and end all. We've got players who haven't played in the Championship, people like Luke O'Nien. The squad depth isn't brilliant, but there's a core nucleus of players there who are going to be able to grow together in the next 3 or 4 years. And I hope exactly what you'd said before with the model of resaleable value and stuff like that. I would hope that as a general rule, let's say 80% of these players are probably not going to get the opportunity to play on a much bigger stage than what we can offer them, especially if we get back to the Premier League with 48,000 fans in there rocking the place every week. So why wouldn't they want to grow with that? Now, don't get me wrong. You get someone like Michu or a Burnett who turns into a world beater, absolute superstar, and Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, one of them come knocking and suddenly go, right, 40 million. That's the model working perfectly. But I'd imagine the amount of players that's going to happen to is going to be minimal. So I think whenever you're building a squad to go and try, and I've said that this is something I've banged on about for seasons when we're in League One and we're speaking about things. Whenever you're going to build a squad to go and try and compete and challenge towards the top end of the table rather, you literally have to keep building them and adding to them. And I think we've got that as a general rule, you know. So I'm still quite excited. I haven't seen, considering we were down to 10 men against Sheffield United, we put in a performance. Okay, the result wasn't great, but we put in a performance. Last night against Boro, okay, let's be generous and say an hour of it wasn't great. There was still 30 minutes of positives there, I think, which you've got to remember a couple of seasons ago, we were struggling to beat bloody Accrington Stanley. Yeah. So to be getting beat 1-0 off Boro, let's just like reset a little bit and think to ourselves, actually, if that's as bad as it's going to get this season, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to get beat 5 games on the bounce because all your confidence gone and whatever. But I'd like to think we get back to Sunderland on Saturday, knock Millwall about a little bit, play some good football, because the style of football we're trying to play is impressive, and just go again. There's going to be ups and downs, there's no doubt about it, but I still think we'll win more than we lose, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I feel really similar with that. The only thing I would say, and it, to be honest, again, it sounds like I'm being like Officer Doom here, and I probably am being, but when you touched on the modelling stuff there, there's another concern that I've banged on about for months on end. That's because it hasn't been sorted for months on end. We're talking about the model and how the model realistically is good young players, and then you sell them at a profit who go to a club that they want to go to, essentially, until we get back into the Premier League, and then we can start hopefully being one of those top 10 or whatever in the long term goal. The most successful player that we signed in this model is Ross Stewart. So when they work, why are we not protecting that asset and giving him a new contract? But that's by the by. That's a contract. That's a question that probably can't be answered, probably because we're not giving him enough money. But there you go. That's nonetheless. It's by the by. One big positive, Brad. I want to end on positives because ultimately I'm feeling all right. If I'm honest, I sound like dead defeatist, and I'm actually ultimately I'm all right. I've been happy with the 7-ish performances. If you'd given me this amount of points at this point at the start of the season, would I have took it? Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. But one big positive, we've touched on Cirkin in the past few weeks. We've touched on Roscoe every week since we've signed him, pretty much. One big positive and a player that we haven't touched on for me, and I think he's been brilliant throughout the campaign, and I thought he was absolutely colossal last night. Danny Bart. I thought he was far and wide our player of the match, and I think, as the weeks go on, he's grown into that role of a real leader for like a young team, which is absolutely vital that we have players like that in a team that has players essentially 24 and under across the park. How impressed have you been by Danny Bart, not just last night, but over the first 8 games in the Championship?
Yeah, very impressed. We've mentioned him a couple of times and said he's sort of that experienced head at the back that we needed. It was either going to be him or Bailey Wright. I was happy with either starting the season, to be honest. Danny Barr got the nod and he's kept his place, and deservedly so. I thought he played okay last night. He did win pretty much all his aerial duels, especially. I thought him and Onai maybe did switch off for the goal. They got straight through the middle of the pair of them. But if we're talking about centre halves, I think Onai needs another mention as well, because I thought last night he didn't really do much wrong. He was comfortable trying to bring it out from the back as well. So yeah, there is positives. And that being, to be fair, it's been a makeshift defence. We haven't been battered at all, really, have we? I think the most we've conceded in the game's 2. Granted, it's happened a couple of times, but yeah, I'd agree with the Danny Bart statement throughout the course of the season, especially. But now he needs to take that leadership skill, and whoever comes in and slots in at the left side for Cirkin, which, looking when he came off, it was O'Nien, and Bailey Wright will probably get the nod at right centre half if we stay at the 3. It's up to Danny Bart to keep his performances up and ultimately keep that back line organised. And I think Danny Bart's leadership, not just on the outfield, I think he's brought Patterson on leaps and bounds as well.
Yeah, I thought he was great last night. I kind of agree a little bit on the goal, but for me, you stopped the cross, which I think goes to, sorry if I'm wrong here, but if my mind serves me right, Lyndon Gucci. Probably the only thing he did wrong all night. I thought he had another good game, Gucci. David, another positive for me. I've seen 1 or 2 people not agree, but I've seen most people agree. I thought Amad Diallo looked good. My big worry whenever you get a young player from the likes of Man United and this is called the Adnan Januzaj effect, is that they don't give a shit about the club and they're lazy and they don't chase after things. He chased after a lot. He did a lot of pressing. He really sort of went to the goalkeeper, made sure that he was, they were on the toes in Boro's defence, and it pushed us forward a little bit. Had that chance near the end where he backheeled it. I could see what he was doing. I thought it was actually quite clever, but unfortunately Sims was just not on the same level as him. But I think overall I was actually really impressed by Diallo, and I think he's probably going to offer quite a bit to us this season. I think he's going to end up being quite a decent signing, and the evidence yesterday was good. Were you equally as impressed?
The attitude seems to be right. Which is, listen, it's probably 9/10 of the law when you come to play for Sunderland, isn't it? Make sure you wear your heart on your sleeve, chase it down. I'm sure at one point I saw on the camera actually threw his arms about a little bit and had a bit of a whinge at someone, which is quite impressive for being there such a short time. So yeah, I think there's definitely something there to work with. It'll be a case of finding his best position, where to play him, who to play him with. Are we going to play him as more of a winger, which, as Brad said earlier on, we may well have to go to like a 4-2-3-1 type formation, which Diallo might come into his own then. So yeah, as with any kid that you're going to sign from a big club, he's going to be raw. There's going to be frustration with him, but I definitely think there's something there to work with.
I think he must be the first player in history as well to have his own song sang for about 15 minutes straight before he's kicked the ball for the club. Because that's got to give him a lot of confidence coming on. We've seen him getting warmed up in the whole of the away ends, just singing a new song for him. So yeah, I mean, I do agree as well. I mean, I'm the opposite one of what Graham said. I think he should have took the shot on himself. If he misses, fine, but he has done the back heel. Sometimes that comes off and we go, wow, brilliant. But yeah, I was of the one, especially because we were creating very few chances and he was through. Just swing your foot at it. If it goes in, it goes in. If not, you might test the keeper, and it could have fell back out at Sims. But hey, he's a young kid; he'll learn as well.
And I think ultimately that's why he's here, to learn. And I've got no real issue with players if they come for the season and they learn their trade. And I think we're going to have to, like I spoke about Patterson yesterday, and there's sometimes Patterson does stuff and I panic a bit, but I'm kind of aware that he's good enough to be number one. He does more good stuff than bad stuff, but he's going through that learning phase where there's going to be one or two things that he's having to learn. And like I say, overall, like the recruitment model, I quite like. I just wish we could tinker it a little bit to have some nice, lovely, experienced 30-year-olds in there as well. But that's by the by. It's not going to happen. If it didn't happen for Alex Neil, it's not going to happen for me. I think going.
I just wonder if. Sorry, I was just wondering if we've still got that list of free transfers and Zlatan's still on it.
I think he's. Where's he at now?
Andy Carroll's on it.
No. No,
I mean, I looked at that free transfer when I put it in the group earlier, and I think the only person that stands out, and it's just, again, it's the romance thing, it's Fraser Campbell. Because if you look at the free agents, if we're going in that market, there was nothing on there.
Jerome Sinclair's got to be worth another shot, surely.
I'm definitely editing this out, Jesus Christ. Going into Millwall on Saturday, Brad, obviously it's a strange one in some ways, because if we win, it means we've won 4 of the first 9. With 2 of those games being like late levelers for Coventry and QPR. But if we lose, it means we've then lost 4 out of the first 9. If we draw, probably more similar to the latter than the former than the latter. How much do you think, though, ultimately, not just the Millwall game, these next few games, next few weeks, Watford, Reading, who are in good form, away from home, and Millwall will kind of shows how the season's going to pan out?
I think the Millwall's game is massive, actually, because although people tip Reading to be down the bottom come the end, they've actually had a really good start.
Brilliant start.
I think they're sat third, so that's going to be a difficult away day. And Watford, it's a free hit, in my opinion. No one will expect us to get anything. So the Millwall game, I think, rightly or wrongly, or fairly or not, it's massive. In the context of, like you said, it defines, obviously, the first 9 games, if it's 3-3-3. Or if we've won 4, and you know what I mean. So, will I take a point now? Probably. I've said about every single game, and I did say on the opening show of the season, I think the first 10 games is all about the performances for me, and on the whole, the performances have been good, and they are filling me with more confidence. But now we're getting to the 10 to 12 game mark where these performances now should be meriting the results. So we need to start. We've played badly against Bristol City first half, came away with a win. We've played really well and dropped points. These are the ones now where if we are playing well, we need to be taking our chances and starting to win games. And if we play poorly, we look at it and go, hey, we've played well for 3 games, picked up 6-7 points or whatever. We've played poorly, we've lost that one, dust ourselves down and go again. So I'm gonna say Millwall's probably the last one where I would say if we play well and we get a point, yeah, I'd take it now. And then we really need to start kicking on.
Yeah, I want to win. I think Reading and Watford's really tough. I'm not 100% sure I'd be happy with a point, but I kind of take the sentiment. But as it is, that's kind of that's all we have time for, folks. I know the turnaround's quite quick in the podcast and stuff, so if you're listening to this, the preview will be with you very, very soon. But as always, Brad, thanks for joining me. Dave, lovely to have you back. Lovely to have you back as part of the team. I can now get rid of Ross, which I've been down to do for ages and ages and ages because I hate Ross. What I would do, don't subscribe to the podcast. Just tell Ross that he's not part of it anymore via the medium of Twitter if you are a fan of What the Falk. If you're not, just don't do anything. Thanks for lasting the half an hour. Enjoy what's left of your week and enjoy the weekend. How are the lads?